Hi guys, and welcome to this video on understanding delays. We're going to kick things off with the very basics. I want to kind of just walk you through the essentials of how a delay actually functions. I'm going to take a look at recreating the sort of internal signal path of how a delay works. And then we're going to be taking a look at just a few of these sort of basic controls that you can expect to find. Now, these are pretty simple concepts to begin with, but I always find it handy to actually really get a firm understanding of how things are working before we delve into the more complex delay plugins. So let's take a look. I've got a number of fairly simple delays here we're going to look at just a second and just discuss what some of these controls do. But I wanted to just first show you how a delay actually comes about functioning. So we've got our signal, which is going to be the input into the delay. And then we have a thing that I'm going to refer to quite often called a buffer. So a buffer is essentially a segment of data which is captured and in this case recorded. It's audio that's recorded into the buffer. So we'll take our raw input, which is this clap sound, and we can record that into the buffer, which would be this represented by this channel here. Then, according to a timing that we set, we tell that buffer to play back. Let's say if we wanted to set our delay to a quarter note, that means the buffer would play back at a quarter note there. So now we have our delay playing back. So now it's important to realize at this point, the original signal doesn't feed into the delay anymore. You have what's called a feedback loop. So this recording that we have here that's just played back essentially plays back into the buffer, which was recorded here. So we're going to record this playback of the buffer into the buffer once again. But before we do that, we're going to turn this down. So this one is effectively playing 6 dB softer than that. This one gets recorded back into the buffer. So this is now 6 dB softer than that one, and we're going to reduce this by 6 dB once again. That gets played a quarter note later, and once again this gets recorded back into the buffer. And then once again gets played a quarter note later and reduced in volume, which is governed by the feedback, which results in our completed delay loop. And that's how it works. So what you need to realize, though, the reason why I illustrate this is when you start adding other stuff into the equation, like, say, for instance, the filters, which we'll look at now, you must realize that this audio, as the buffer plays it back from the original input, will get filtered and then recorded at the same time back into the buffer and fed back in on itself. So that will result in the filter sort of becoming more and more apparent the further on the delay plays. So let's just take a look at some of the basic controls here. I've got a really, really simple delay from that's built into Steinberg called mono delay. We're going to essentially replicate exactly what we had now. If we set that to a quarter note, we'll set our leave our feedback at about 50%, and we'll set our mix to 50% as well. Let's take a listen to what we get. And there you have it. That's pretty much what we had before. Let's take a listen to what happens if we add in the high filter now. Yeah, how the sound becomes duller. Right, so sorry to bore you with the absolute basics like that, but now that's out of the way, let's dive in. We're going to take a look at some specific delays and their functionality, a couple of different categories of them. Let's jump in. I'll check you in the next video. Cheers. So the first kind of delay that I want to look at here is just this typical stereo delay, and quite often they will have a ping-pong mode as well. So ping-pong and stereo delays. These are really going to be your sort of workhorses for most of the sort of rhythmic delay stuff that you do. I've chosen a repeater in this case from D16 just to showcase some of the controls here. Most of these kind of delays will have a lot of similarities. Some of them have functionality which is called labeled slightly differently, for example. We'll hopefully cover most of it and you'll be able to figure that out as we go. So let's take a look at the controls here compared to our mono delay that we did before. We've got the delayed time here, which is we can set, you can see 1/16 notes, eighth notes, quarter notes like we had before. We have got the mix full at the moment, so let's dial that back to 50%. And then we have a similar result that we had with our simple mono delay before. Now, the benefit with a stereo delay is that we can actually set the delay times independently for the left and right delay lines. So we can, for instance, unlink these, and we will set our left signal to, let's say, an eighth note. There you can hear quarter notes playing on the right channel only. And let's change the time signature now as well. This is another typical control that you're going to see in delays, is the ability to change it from full, dotted, and triplets. Triplets obviously will fit into a 1/3 time signature. The dotted mode is essentially going to be an eighth note plus a 16th. So 1.5 times whatever you have set here. So you could also represent that as 3/16 as your timing. And a lot of the delays will often have different time signatures or ways of looking at time. I'll show you some of the uhi stuff is very different to this as well, the way that they represent that. So let's set that to a dotted note. Let's take a look. So we've got 1.5 times and a 1/8 on the other side. There you go. So you get that sort of nice different movement occurring there now. Link the feedbacks. Right, so the difference between a stereo delay like this and the ping pong delay is the stereo delay, they run independently from one another. The ping pong runs together in most cases. However, it will switch between the left and right channel, essentially mute one of the channels or one of the record buffers and pan it either left or right. So I'll show you what happens there. In this case, you can actually still have different settings for the left and right speakers, but one of them will not sound when the other one is sounding. So let's set these back to eighths like this. We'll hit ping pong. Take a listen to what happens now. And you can hear they are switching from left to right once that initial. There you go. And let's also take a listen to what happens now. If I set that back to a dotted note as well, you'll hear the same ping pong happening there, but far more sparse as opposed to the stereo delay like that. So ping pong, it's going to delay the left, then delay the right, and so forth and so forth. These ones are essentially being delayed at exactly the same time. Now, another thing you see here, spread, you see this sometimes on delays as well. It doesn't necessarily mean the width of the left and right panning. Some delays do handle it in that way. The spread in this case is little time shifts between each of them. So if you listen to this out of ping pong mode with just an eighth note delay like this again, listen to what happens as we dial the spread up. It adds positive and negative values to the delay times on the left and right channel. So you kind of get a much more loose kind of feel. If we look at something like Echo Boy from Sound Toys, they have a similar implementation in this groove, shuffle, and swing area, and this rushed and dragging feeling. You can adjust the delays slightly off axis so that they're not perfectly synced to the time signature that you put in here. So lastly, we just got a filter here, pretty much the same as before. We've got high pass and low pass options. The color, this is another thing. In Echo Boy, for example, you have the saturation control. The color in repeater does pretty much the same thing. And then additionally, this one you actually have some different delay models. The same goes for Echo Boy as well. What these models will do is, as we discussed before, the delay buffer has an inherent sound applied to it, whether it's as a, most likely in this case, an impulse response. So when the recording happens into the delay buffer, that recording is degraded with one of these and then passed out. It sounds and then gets recorded back in and then degrades further and further and further until you have this kind of tone. You can hear the difference there. We'll go with telephone, for example. We'll even turn those off. So it's inherent filtering inside of the buffer itself. that would kind of give it that character. Right, so we'll cover some usage cases in this later on. Let's move on to the next delay type. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. If you love this video, then smash a like, and if you want to be notified about new videos, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Peace!